Thank you, Kara. Yate shike doshe she'e Jade Begay yinishet. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Again, thank you, Kara, for that intro. And yes, actually, I wanted to begin sharing that fun fact that Kara mentioned, which is that 8 years ago, as she mentioned, I was a recipient of the Bioneers Youth Scholarship, Indigenous Youth Scholarship. And so you all are really witnessing a true full circle moment right now. Yeah, that was my first time to Bioneers. I was, like Kara said, fresh out of grad school, beginning my career as a campaigner and a strategist, and yeah, now I'm here talking to you all. So this really does feel like a huge milestone, and I just feel really honored and mostly grateful to people like Kara and Alexis and really the entire Bioneers team who understand what it means to invest in Indigenous youth and Indigenous leadership. Yes, round of applause. And platform us, right? So yes, kudos to everyone behind the scenes. But yeah, 8 years. A lot has happened in that span of time. And while I know a lot of really heavy and hard things have happened in the last 8 years, I want to spend time today with you all talking and reflecting on and really celebrating the good things that have happened, the progress and the wins. So let me locate my little thing. As you all know, the theme of this year's conference is celebration, transformation, and regeneration. So let's take a moment to first celebrate, and not just celebrate for the sake of it, but because, as many of you know, this work to protect our communities, to defend land and waters, it is an uphill battle every single day. The opposition is constant and persistent, and it is straight up exhausting. Yes, thank you for that affirmation. So celebration and acknowledgement of our wins is not just good for morale in our movements. It's critical to stay in this work. You all know a lot of people in our movement ecosystems are healing from trauma, generational trauma, and trauma from the ongoing onslaught of political, social, and economic oppression. And just like our trauma can be remembered and stored in our bodies, so can our joy. So this is why it's critical to celebrate and acknowledge even the baby steps that take us toward the world we deserve. I think celebrating is healing and helps us to keep going and helps us to do this work, this very heavy work, from a place of joy and really from a place of trusting our wins. I've learned over time that when we don't acknowledge the baby steps or when we minimize the wins that we've seen over the last however many years, it chips away slowly at the trust in our own work. So, with that, let's celebrate some small and big wins for Indigenous leadership and self-determination over the last few years. And also just to note, in no real chronological order, because what is time? All right. So to start, in 2018, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland became the first Native American women elected into Congress, paving the way for Indigenous leadership in political office in the US. One could say that this led to the 2020 cycle where Congress welcomed 6 Indigenous representatives to the US House, a historical record. In total that year, 114 Native American people ran for public office and 72 were elected. I want to mention that a majority of those elected were Indigenous women. Then in 2021, Madam Secretary Deb Haaland, or Auntie Deb as we like to say, made history when she became the first Native American to serve as a cabinet secretary and lead the Department of Interior. A department once ran by a man who declared its mission was to civilize or exterminate Native people. Also, in 2021, we saw Bears Ears fully restored back to its original monument status after attacks by you-know-who. Shout out Stormy Daniels. Oil leases were suspended in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, creating space and time for us to organize to protect those lands permanently. KXL was killed and the company walked away from their agenda. That same year, Native Organizers Alliance Illuminative and the Center for Native American Youth completed the groundbreaking Indigenous Futures Survey, the largest research project ever conducted in Indian country, with participation from over 6,400 Native peoples across the country, representing 401 tribes and from all 50 states. This survey provides us with critical insights and data on how Native people are motivated and what their beliefs are when it comes to identity, voting, and civil engagement. It's big stuff, yeah. For the first time in more than 3 decades since its inception, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change mentioned the term colonialism in a 2022 report, acknowledging something that Indigenous peoples, as we know, have been championing for decades, if not centuries, that colonization caused climate change. And then bringing it back to my little neck of the woods, the organization I work with, Andean Collective, became, as of 2022, last year, the largest Indigenous-led fund in history, providing over 600 tribes, Indigenous groups, and island nations a total of $32 million since our origin in 2018. In 2022, across the country, 650 geological features that included the S word have been or are being renamed in order to confront racism and make public lands and spaces accessible. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Palisades Tahoe. Last year, because of the tireless work of environmental justice organizers and Indigenous organizers who fought like hell for policies that center Indigenous self-determination, racial equity, and environmental and climate justice, we saw the passing of the largest climate investment in history with the Inflation Reduction Act, which specifically directs $722 million to tribes and Indigenous communities, and then some. And yes, I know that there are nuances to this legislation, but we cannot minimize the opportunity that exists here to do infrastructure in a way that repairs harm caused by past development and honors climate and environmental justice. We've also seen advances in the acknowledgement of Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. This past December, the White House agencies released new government-wide guidance and accompanying implementation memorandum for federal agencies on recognizing and including Indigenous knowledge in federal research, policy, and decision-making. And last, but certainly not least, I could go on, according to the Native Land Digital, over the course of 2022, there were over 29 plus land returns to Indigenous nations, including right here in Oakland, or right next door, the tribe of Lishan Ohlone have all seen small and large pieces of land returned. So, yes, let's celebrate and give it up for everyone who's been involved in that work and these achievements. These wins are shifting power dynamics and even saving lives, because we know when it comes to climate change, it doesn't happen in a bubble. So when we have a win in the Arctic or here in Oakland, when we protect biodiversity over here and some Indigenous rights over there, that is a win for everyone across the world, period. But, but I know a lot of you are skeptical, and you're still sitting with this tension and grappling with the concern that while there's been all this progress, and yet we're still seeing things like the Willow Project approved. We're seeing land grabs take place across the world for green or clean energy solutions that, without safeguards, will threaten water systems and ecosystems, and therefore the lifeways of Indigenous peoples. We're still seeing philanthropy fail on delivering dollars meant for Indigenous communities. One specific example is the $1.7 billion commitment made for Indigenous peoples at COP26, and only 7% of those funds reaching our people directly. 7%. So what do we do about this tension? Well, what I can offer is how my comrades and colleagues and I are working to advance Indigenous leadership and advance the advocacy of our rights so that we can keep winning. Because let's be real, this dynamic of us fighting the same fights over and over and over and over again is frankly killing us. It's unsustainable, it's driving us into burnout and apathy, and people are leaving the movement, we're losing retention. So I think about the other two themes of this conference, regeneration and transformation, and how it is that we can breathe new life into our strategies and tactics so that we can achieve true systems transformation. So before I close, I want to share just 3 things that I am doing and considering and also practicing to strengthen our work as advocates and activists and humans just trying to do good in this climate crisis. So first, right now I am working with over 24 environmental justice organizers at the Tishman Design Center in the Ripe for Creative Disruption Environmental Justice Movement Fellowship. And in this fellowship, we're designing new tactics and strategies for our environmental justice movement because, again, just real talk, our moves are predictable. The opposition has figured out ways to not only minimize our tactics, our strategies, and our impact, but they're criminalizing us for things like protest. So we just need new tactics. And so while we work on those outside strategies, at the same time, I also think we need complementary tools to improve our advocacy and to prove more strongly what we already know to be true. But those truths don't necessarily show up or exist in research or papers that drive policy. So I'm working with an amazing team at University of Michigan, a team of Indigenous researchers, to build a first-of-its-kind national survey on how climate change impacts Native people. And this might sound basic, but that's because it is, and yet we do not have this data to shape legislation. Second, I am really inspired right now, in particular, by the work that some of my colleagues and mentors like Janine Yazzie are doing to train up our movements, us, to be more aligned in how we advocate and what language we use in our advocacy. So to shine more light on that, let's take the example of sovereignty. Sovereignty versus self-determination. Sovereignty has become a buzzword, if you will. But while sovereignty is the right to govern ourselves, it's a right that is dependent on other sovereign governments acknowledging that. Whereas self-determination, as Janine has taught me, is about self-identification. This terminology is stronger because it really captures that Indigenous peoples have the right to choose our own political status and choose our own cultural and economic development. You see what I mean? Another area we need to strengthen is how we talk about Indigenous peoples as rights holders. To quote Janine, Indigenous peoples are not stakeholders. We are not just colonial subjects to these colonial powers. We are rights holders with our own body of recognized treaty rights, inherent rights, and international rights, and we deserve to be recognized as such. So when we are lumped in with stakeholders, we are lumped in a category with limited rights when it comes to participating in government decisions and policy making, end quote. So in our advocacy, we need to be stronger and more aligned on what we are saying and really draw on the legacies of those who have built things like the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And third and last, and this is a little more personal and esoteric, but it's all connected, and that is the idea of devotion. To me, devotion is stronger than, say, solidarity, which again, I think has become a little bit of a buzzword. Devotion, rather, is about deep love, loyalty, and even worship. And those things are things that I want to do for our planet, or show our planet, our sacred Mother Earth. So one thing I am doing, for example, in the next few years is giving up air travel. And it sounds silly and a little mundane, but you know, it's for me, it's less about the jet fuel and the carbon footprint, although that's great. And it's more about localizing. It's more about, in this climate crisis, I don't need to be zooming all over the world. I just don't. But what I want to be doing is just being more devoted to my place, my ecosystem, my people, my community. And so this commitment of localizing is going to help me do that. And you know, I know there's this narrative that well, it's not the consumer's fault, it's the corporation, it's the industry, it's the military, and that's all true, very true. But we can't keep using that as an excuse to change our behaviors, because the truth is that if we keep using energy, if we keep consuming the same way or in the way that we've gotten used to doing that via the fossil fuel economy, we're going to mine every single mineral from this planet and jeopardize Indigenous peoples first. So, to recap, we need more creative disruption, investment into new tactics, new strategies that are exciting. We need to align and work smarter, not harder, on our advocacy, and we need to make some bold commitments and devote ourselves to degrowth and change our lifestyles so that we are making way for regeneration, transforming systems, and so that we can continue to celebrate more and more wins. Thank you.